All right, can everybody hear me? Yes? Okay, wonderful. Okay. Awesome. Well, while our panelists get settled, this conversation is really all about data, and some people, data is very normal. You look at your own dashboards, you have your own data warehouse, you're thinking about it all the time. For other people, you don't know what really data even means. How do you find it? Why is it so scary? I don't really know what's going on. I'd rather not look at it and just run my business. And so the goal in this conversation, initially I'm just gonna talk for a quick 5 minutes of just kind of an introduction into what the hell is data and why is it important. And then we're gonna open it up to our expert panelists, all operators in different markets, different kinds of businesses, to see how they leverage data to run, grow, and really understand their business. So, am I going? I think I have to jump.
There you go.
There it is.
Every time.
Okay, is there another one? Can we go one more?
Under the leg, that's all.
I think under the leg worked. No, it didn't? Okay, go one more if you don't. There we go. All right, so first we're gonna dive into what is data. And at a high level, right? Data is really about the actionable insights that you get into your business, where you can get a deeper view into what's actually happening and then take action on them. Is this a different one? Amazing. Okay, I'm gonna give you this one. Okay, but data is just a concept. It could be a transaction, it could be a customer name, it could be anything relating to the operations of your business. The most important thing is to then do something with that. So step number one, when you have your data, is to collect it from all the different sources, right? For us, obviously, it's Sense. We're not the most subtle with our logo giantly plastered on the wall in the other room, but we're trying to help you centralize that. But however you run your operations with any system, the idea is you want to pull all of the different areas where you're receiving revenue, where your customers are coming in, your marketing, and try to collect that. Okay? Then you want to clean it, make sure it's all accurate, make sure it makes sense, there's no outliers, there's no inconsistencies. Once you've collected it, you want to then organize it in either a dashboard or a spreadsheet or something that you can actually look at it and start to really understand. And once that's all together, you can start to evaluate what it actually means. But after that, in that evaluation, we want to understand, why is it valuable? What is it going to tell me about my business? And by the way, everything that I'm saying for operators, this is universal across any business. Some of you might have been in restaurants, or for us as a software vendor, we do the same thing to better understand what is actually happening, so we build better product, offer better services, provide better support, etc. So things like hidden patterns and trends, the customer behaviors. Are you growing revenue? Okay, great, you grew revenue, but why? How do you make that repeatable? What is the actual underlying element of that growth, right? So what is the efficiency that you have in your business? Great, you have employees. What is the performance of those employees? How many pounds per hour is your average employee folding? How are you compensating those employees? How do you know which one's bringing in more customers and being great leaders? How do you become more operationally efficient based on the data in your operations and with your employees? Right, so all this, it's saving money, it's growing revenue, it's increasing retention of customer. It's all the key things that you think about to grow and manage your business. However, a lot of people, and you could be in the Facebook groups looking at the concerns that people have of tech companies and big data and what is that really gonna mean, and a lot of people are very afraid of data and the concept of it. And there's a pretty reasonable reason for that, right? It could be because it's just overwhelming. Just a lot of different data points for you to really understand. It's not necessarily an easy thing, especially if you're not a data scientist or have any background in it. It can be kind of overwhelming and difficult. And also, if you're not trained, there can be a reasonable skill gap, right, in doing it. The cost of actually having tools that can visualize data for you, right? It's the cost of going from coin and cash at the register to actually digitizing in different forms of payment. Change management, you didn't have a system before, you want to add a system for data, and maybe the data quality and maybe even the security. Oh, I work with a company that has my data, what are they going to do about it? What are they going to do? They're going to open stores near me, they're going to sell it, they're going to do all these crazy things, and that's scary, I don't want to work with them, I don't want anybody to have my data, I'd rather not look at it. And these are some of the things that I think we want you to be mindful of, because your fears are not unreasonable if you have them. To a certain extent. There's a lot of ways that you can actually quell those fears if you ask the right questions the people that you work with. Because a lot of the people that are providing you the data are maybe vendors that you that you've bought software or hardware at different products from. So what questions are you asking those vendors to better evaluate, do I have a reasonable concern? Do I think they are going to actually do something malicious? Questions like, do you have a team in-house that's going to make sure my data is protected? And do you have policies that if you get hacked, what happens? How is data stored? Is that something you manage, or do you farm it out to somebody else? Do you know what it even means? Do you have people in your company that run your information systems and technology and development operations? All very reasonable questions somebody who doesn't know anything about data can get a reasonable answer for to make you feel secure as you're growing and scaling. Maybe you want to ask the company, how do you make any money? We go on Facebook. It's free. They make money. They make money through advertisements and the data and how you utilize their platform, and you utilize other sites, and they sell that data to advertisers. That's how they make money. And then what is your plan for growth? How do you become profitable? What are the things that you are trying to do as a business so you guys, in evaluating your vendors, get a better understanding of who you're working with, what their goals and plans are, what their monetization strategy is. Will they ever sell your data? Is that a strategy that they plan on implementing? And maybe documentation. Can you walk me through how data is stored? Do you own my data? Who owns my data? If I call you tomorrow and say, destroy all my data, nobody should have it. Do they have a policy for that? Do they show you proof of that destruction? Right? These are all, again, reasonable questions any vendor of yours should be able to answer and show really thoughtful proof of. And then beyond the data, it's compliance. Are you ADA compliant for the Disabilities Act? Are you California Consumer Protections Act in terms of privacy and managing of data? Payment card industry data security standards called PCI. Maybe you've heard of it on payments. Are you tracking that? Are you filling out PCI audits? Are you just tell me more about how you as a vendor are working through those compliance questions? So, you know, I think I'm excited to I think hear more from the actual operators that think about data in terms of its, you know, maybe the risks and concerns they have, but moreover, how you actually harness the incredible power and insights that it can deliver. So with that, super excited to introduce, you know, Gilli is our Chief Product Officer and co-founder. He'll be moderating this panel with myself, Jason, and we'll actually pass it around, and maybe Jason and Bhavin go around and maybe introduce yourself for everybody.
Sure. So my name's Jason Worme. Grew up in New York City from a young age, as you can tell from the accent. No, I didn't. I moved recently from Australia to New York City about 2 years ago. We have 2 stores located in Brooklyn and Staten Island.
Yeah. My name is Bhavin Patel. We're in Texas, SpinXpress Laundry. We had a wash, dry, fold business that we started in COVID. We started since we opened our first location, but we are now starting to ramp up and starting to use data and some other, you know, tools that are out there to begin scaling what we can do in the wash, dry, fold, and pickup and delivery space.
Brian Reisland, Laundry Genius in Everett, Washington. I have 1 store, predominantly self-serve focused, opportunistic on the drop-off and stuff like that, and trying for more, but real estate in Seattle area is expensive.
And shout out to Brian, because I did say, hey, Brian, you want to do this panel? About 5 minutes ago. And so let me see. I'm going to actually grab the iPad back from there. I'm going to give this to Gilli.
Okay, so the way we want to kind of structure this conversation today is we'll kind of break it up and just try to get as much insights from these guys that are thinking a lot about data out to the room. But let's kind of think about it in a couple different ways. One is operationally. How are we using data to make sure that our operations are more efficient? And then, of course, marketing, our customer behaviors, and how we're learning about our customers. What are we doing to get more customers? And then one thing that Jason and I were talking about a little bit earlier is we are more and more inclined to go with data and to look at these data. And so is there a role for our gut in our decision making? And kind of like, I think we all can think about that in our day-to-day lives. And so I also want to be able to touch on that, because I think like when you're trying something new, right, you don't necessarily have that, or the data points that you're looking at aren't necessarily the ones that are driving to the right answer. So how do you balance what you feel you know with telling yourself, stop it, you know nothing, only listen to the data? Cool. So let's just get started a little bit. I'm going to start with operations, because I think it's like a real straightforward one that we can all take something from. Why don't we just kind of ask you guys, you can raise your hand, whoever wants to answer, and just say, okay, what are we doing from like a wash, dry, fold perspective that is that is based all in data?
Yeah, so I can kick off, I guess. So I guess it's come to be something that we kind of do like just day to day inherently, but it actually started from a point of understanding the data, and then we actually had some problems as our business grew that we got behind operationally. And so we just do a simple calculation of pounds in, a forecast of pounds that we can process per hour, per labour unit that we have, and then the customer's due date. We've actually built a little dashboard that takes a feed from Sense. It goes into a separate piece of software that we build ourselves. We run 3 shifts in our main store, 24 hours. And so we take the data from Sense, we upload it into an operations dashboard, and that gives us a view across the 3 shifts as to whether or not we're behind or in fact are okay and going to meet the delivery timelines that we have for our customers. And I guess what comes out of that then is decisions. So if you are behind, you've got options then around bringing in more labour, talking to customers about relaxing the delivery time, making the driver potentially change his route to give some more time, things like that. So I think Alex's introduction was pretty high level in terms of like how I think about data. The way I use data is more at a tactical level to run, understand, and operate and grow my business. So it's less about, and if we care about that, but I guess we partner with Sense because they're taking care of that, the data security in the top level piece. We no longer have to worry about that. And so the data that I'm going to talk about today, it's tactical, operational level data around how do I run, operate, grow, and sell my business to new customers. So operationally, that we use a dashboard to assist with that day to day.
Yeah. Cool. Just one quick comment on that. What Jason has done is he's actually created his own data dashboard because, of course, whatever software you're using or softwares you're using, you're getting a bunch of data points there, but then everybody's running their business differently and have different goals, different growth paths. And so kind of how are we getting that out and visualizing it for ourselves? He's built his own dashboard, but there's lots of really great ways to get that data out and kind of combine it and look at it holistically.
Yeah.
Yep. So from an operations standpoint, I think the most effective way we've used data is when we're in the commercial space. We were doing maybe around, we started a commercial plant, and within the first, month and a half, 2 months, we were over, I think, 1,200 or 1,400 pounds per day that we were trying to process into a facility that only had 235-pound washers, or 160-pound washers. We realized quickly that our facility's not big enough. We outgrew it before we even fully opened the facility up, and realized that we needed to build some efficiencies on how we can take the information on what kind of how many pounds we're going to be expecting from every week over week, day over day, and start planning and scheduling the inventory, because this is commercial, so it was a rental. So how much is coming in, how much can you process, and how much you're going to have ready for the next day to be able to get out before the raw driver goes and picks up more laundry, can process and get out the door the next day. So same thing, we were working in Excel back then because we didn't have time, and I think it was like 4 years ago, so data was still relatively new in terms of how much you can work with it. So we build our models in Excel very simply just to be able to utilize our laundromats in order to actually process laundry overnight for our 24-hour facilities and actually get it out. So data can be very important, and we wouldn't have been able to do it if we didn't have the right platform to be able to extract that level of information and be able to put it into either, in this case, spreadsheet, or now dashboards and other tools that are available out there.
Yeah, I think it's similar, probably more similar to Jason, but like the point you just made, you have to have the data, right? And I've, over 3 years in business, and if I track like 160 things a month, most of it, you could call it noise, I may never use, but like just recently I had an expansion opportunity, and I was able to call upon that to really analyze the square foot on real estate and stuff like that. And it was really enlightening to me about my current store and kind of my overall strategy. But where Gilli started, it starts with wash, dry, fold. I'm super simple. I'm really small. I don't really look about efficiency. I have my people that run my laundromat. They can handle the business. And when you talk about decision making, it isn't the only thing. It's my quantitative point. Like, we made a decision last November to fire a customer, right? It was informed by the data, but I had to go with my gut that it was that. And to this day, I track, like, have I made up that customer? And I finally did, so yay. But yeah, it's a tactical decision-making tool for me more than anything else.
Well, I think that's the point, is the data doesn't do anything for you other than give you the ability to make data-driven decisions where you still have to go with your gut, you're still making the calls, but when you can have an informed decision versus a best guess, that's where it can really be the difference between a win and a loss. But just going off that, I'm curious, well, it might seem obvious for a lot of folks, but how is maybe data and trends, and I think, Brian, your example is a good one. How has the data and trends of your customers changed the way that you operate, change your price, change how you look at locations in general?
So we haven't done on the customer side a whole lot, but I do use quite a bit of data when it comes to site selections and our expansion. Most of the time it's been garbage in, garbage out. The data that was available when we first started the industry, which was 6-7 years ago, it's demographic data that you get from CoStar, which is based on census information, and that is all based on forecasts and projections, not real accurate data. Now you have many tools out there that can help you gather, they're actually gathering the data and helping you find locations and actually pinpoint where you should be, building laundromat or car wash or, McDonald's. That level of data is available out there. We've been intaking it, again, in Excel for a very long time, and now we've just kind of moved to a third-party platform to be able to upload that data and start using it to make our decisions when we're selecting sites.
Yeah, so one, I don't know if it necessarily addresses the question exactly, but an important data point for us early on in our business, so we purchased our first location at the start of 2023, and it was, at that point in time, was most of the revenue was generated from self-serve. It's a very small wash and fold, drop-off wash and fold portion to the business. So it was important to me to understand, what was going on in that self-service side of the business, and then how could we, maximize the investment that we just made. So we use a system in that store that is not Sense. It's another product. I don't think I can say names, but it doesn't really matter. Anyway, it generates a set of data, and what we could. So the store used to close at midnight, and the last wash was at 9:30. So big gap there, but that's what I inherited. And I would review the data over the initial couple of months, and we would see that from around 5:30, 6 o'clock, up until around 8:30, we were generating our highest revenue at any point in the day. And so we were sort of turbocharging in these couple of hours, and it was fantastic. But come that 8:30 point, there was like basically it would just drop off a cliff. And then last wash was 9:30, and then we're open then until 12. And so I was just looking at this thinking like, it doesn't make any sense to be open beyond this point really, because we're not generating any revenue. And so we continued to look at the data, and we just consistently saw the same thing happen time and time again. And then what we did next is then we would review the camera footage to see what was going on in the store at around that point in time. And what we discovered were that the attendants who wanted to leave, right on the time when the store was going to be closed up, would be telling the customers that were coming in the door at around 8:30 that we're about to close. And so they were driving business away, not wanting to be having to stay back any later, even though like last wash was another hour, an hour and a half away, and then we were closing, 2.5 hours after that. So we pretty quickly decided to trial being open 24 hours. It was a complication around some cleaning that would happen as an overlap. So we just moved the cleaning from 12 until 4 p.m., which we were paying for anyway, and then we had an extra 2 hours. The store used to open at 6 that we had to cover. So wasn't a lot of extra cost there from what we already had. And so we decided we just put some flyers up on the wall quickly. We didn't have the ability to text everyone at that point in time, but we asked the attendants that are on in the afternoon and evening shifts to let everyone know that we were now open 24 hours got some signs on the door, and almost immediately that supercharged revenue continued. It goes now up until around 11 o'clock, and then it starts to drop off. And we still get drop-off orders at 3 a.m. in the morning that can sometimes be in the hundreds of dollars per drop-off. So data-driven decision. The data allowed us to see something that was odd. Then we were able to see what other pieces of information were available to us to see what was going on and see how we could solve the problem. And then, we pretty quickly made a decision based off what we discovered. And the rest of this history was probably the best decision we'd made for our self-serve business since we started.
No, go ahead.
So for me, I guess the way I operate, for me, I come from the tech world, and it's amazingly how similar a laundromat business can be to an online business where you're concerned about reach, frequency, and yield, right? How many, how often, how much. So, and in that equation, we really only control one of the variables, and it's how much. So I look a lot at how many, the number of cards. I'm a Laundroworks guy, so I know how many people are coming through the store every day. I would look at how many washer cycles they're doing, and then what's the yield I get out of that. And I'm going through a path right now where the business didn't grow like I expected to, and what I think I see in my data is, the economy is hitting people, and where they might have gone hot and cold in 2 separate 20-pound machines, now they're shoving them all in 140 because my number of washers per visit has dropped about 10% recently, and so that's how I use it. But I look at that price lever to see, am I making what I want to in the business? Will the customers tolerate a change so I can maintain that yield at the end of the day, or I am accepting the world that I'm in for a while, that I'm gonna have to accept a little less because they're gonna manage to their budget anyway, which has totally gotten tighter in the past 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So these are some great examples about how they've used data very, very specifically to make those decisions. But it also brings up that data can lead us to assumptions that may or may not be correct, right? If Jason was like, oh, I guess I should just close my shop earlier, that would have been the wrong decision. He would have made a lot less money. But he went the extra mile to kind of test what those assumptions the data was showing him were about. And I think that's really, really important. And I think in data can sometimes be misleading. And there's, averages can hide a lot of either opportunities or hide certain risks. When we're looking at data and trying to get down to that average number, it's not always telling us the right story. It can be filled with false positives. And so have you guys had experience where maybe data has led you awry a little bit, where you've had to course correct after that?
I think for me, I don't know if it ever led me awry, but I realized in looking at very, very short periods of time can totally throw you off. Like 1 week, even 30 days is a really short period of time to look at. And I think it's especially acute for me in what I do on the marketing side and how I look at those results. So it's over the past 6 months, I am a lot more concerned about looking at my year-over-year comps and looking at the trends where I'm at a certain point in the month of that, because that's really telling me a lot more. And being able to go back, for me, just some recent stuff that happened, to go back all the way to October and see that a trend I thought started happening late started then. If I would have made a decision based on that little small piece of data, it would have been a different decision. And ultimately, I decided to sit and wait. So that's kind of why I get ambiguous on the answer, but I was going to do something, but I just sat.
Mm-hmm. We've broken up our our data sets and our forecasts on seasonalities. It's pretty standard in the industry where you see those ebbs and flows throughout your seasons, and know where your summers are going to be slower. Your back to school and everything starts picking up. Your Novembers, Decembers pick up, and then you start seeing a drop down back in February, March. So we've actually broken them into those sections, and instead of trying to force the marketing and try to force the customer base to come in and spend those dollars, we actually pull back in marketing in those times, because we already know that even if we're marketing, it doesn't mean that they're going to change their behavior. They're still going to be on vacations. There's still going to be less clothes that the kids are going to have because they're not in school. So we've used it as a cost savings tool to say, okay, let's pull back on labor, let's pull back on marketing, and let's sit back and then hit the ground running whenever the time comes, and hit those peaks and hit them hard. We've tried to backfill that with pick up and delivery and wash, dry, fold. unsuccessful so far, but that is an avenue where we take that data, that level of information that we get with the seasonalities and say, okay, they're not coming into the laundromat, but maybe this is an opportunity for us to give a promo so that they don't have to do their laundry, or we find a different, so we've started building funnels and customer profiles of who we're targeting. So if we're targeting a soccer mom, for example, then we know exactly what how we're going to be targeting them in the summer versus whenever it's in school.
Yeah, so can we bring up that slide? So I have a slide I presented here, and the point of this slide is to sort of present, I guess, the image of actually really understanding fully what your data tells you. So this is a chart that shows weekly revenue over time for our full service business. And you just look at this and you say, okay, well, it's gradually trending up and to the right. Everything's good in the business. What the next slide shows is a breakout of our sales by service type. So our different types of revenue are broken out here on this chart. And there's a green line at the bottom here, which it's maybe a little bit hard to tell from the back of the room, but it's our pickup and delivery line. And so you can see it's flat, and it maybe even trends down a little bit towards the end there. We had tried for 12 months to grow our pickup and delivery business in New York City, super competitive market. Mark spoke in the last presentation around some of the things that are happening in that industry with gig economy and stuff like that. So we busted our ass to get that red line to move. In April of this year, you can see the orange line on the far right of the graph. We start to work with a lead generation agency. They're in the room here today, and we just see this kick up of the orange line. So the first chart just gives you like the general view that your business is heading in the right direction. But you split that data out into the different categories. We took a decision once we understood this we turned all of our ads off for residential pickup and delivery. We're solely focused at the moment to grow this commercial part of the business because we've finally found an acquisition stream that works for our business in our area. And we couldn't really have done that with certainty without this level of data, because we sort of started to have we had like a gut feel, like Marbo. If you're in Australia, you'd understand that term. Marbo was sort of telling us that commercial was working, but then we get enough months of data that we get this view here, and then it's like let's get straight into this, and that's the thing that's working for us at the moment, and it's going to supercharge our business.
Yeah, again, that goes back to the false positives and false negatives, right? Okay, my revenue's going up, but unless you get a deeper understanding of why that is, you don't know where to double down. You don't know where your dollars are actually going further, and can you, like Bhavin, pull back actually on spend and get more value out of that, not just on a return profile, but still with revenue growth, if you can actually know what the heck is going on. And so I think you see a common theme here, which is really about understanding and the key nature of that. One of the questions which is not on the list that I sent you guys, so sorry about that.
I didn't get a list.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You actually didn't get a list. That's right. But I'm just curious, hearing all the insights and decisions that you've made with that data. Everybody in the room could have different, call it key performance indicators, different indicators of what success is. You all have different goals, potentially. Well, I realize a lot more people over here. You might have different goals in running your business. I'm curious now with the access of data that you have your KPIs changed of what is success for you guys? Have your, maybe it was just, I want to break even on a store, and then, everything from there is great. Or I didn't want to really grow more stores. I thought just an alternative investment, and now I am actually realizing there's a big opportunity. Have your goals and those KPIs changed of what success looks like now with access to data?
For us, we've taken a stance of not getting away from Excel, because one thing that I'm sure everybody in this room feels with data is that you pull your data, you start running it, and then you have to keep up with it. You actually have to have the time to keep feeding the box and getting insights from it. And if you're growing your business, then it becomes very hard to keep up with that level of commitment to take your data and start continuing to process it, continue to look and try to find insights. So we've stopped the chaos on that front, and we're now looking at implementing different software tools that are out there. There's hundreds of them out there that can aggregate your data and start building pipes, start automatically feeding some of these funnels, so that way you can now have these dashboards ready for you and make actionable decisions quickly instead of spending an hour, loading your data, trying to understand it, trying to see what happened. Our goal is to scale and make it more automate as much as we can. But again, the KPIs that I would probably be working on is how do we build KPIs for those false negatives and work on the downside instead of just focusing on the positives. To fill that gap, because when you're feeding a system like that, they're going to give you false positives. You just don't know them. They're going to be masked in different ways, and trying to plan for the worst in the situation or planning for the negative side of it will automatically build our revenue or build our cost per acquisition more favorable.
So our goals, I guess, was always to buy locations and then maximize that investment as much as possible. And so we thought that our pathway to do that was through residential pickup and delivery, as in we could go to a part of the market that our store wasn't located in, and then we could bring volume into the store, and then we could maximize, I guess. So I think about our business as like, I kind of think about it as like payroll management, right? So you're going to have a certain level of staff no matter what you do in a small store. And so you want to make sure you're managing that payroll as efficiently as possible to get the best return on that payroll investment. And so our plan had always been to buy locations, fill the gap in that. So most stores in New York City are underutilized in terms of their labor. So there's not enough full service work coming through the store to keep the labor occupied. So our plan was to always close that gap. And then when you get to that point, you go and make the next acquisition, and then you rinse and repeat with like a cookie cutter system that you can continue to apply. So we did have a challenge, and I spoke about that in the last slide around filling that gap. We weren't able to develop an acquisition system and again, coming back to the data, the financial data was telling us that the cost of acquisition for those residential customers and their lifetime value, we had some. In fact, Matt mentioned in the previous presentation that churn that we saw was pretty much the number that Matt mentioned there, that we had a lot of customers that would have a one-time order and then they wouldn't place the second one. We weren't able to get to a point where we could create a system around that allowed us to acquire customers at a price profitably that was a system that we could just go and repeat. But now we think we're at a point where we understand that we've got a data point that's showing us that we actually have are starting to see that. Now the challenge for us is to put a system around that, and again, that'll be data driven, like what's the cost of acquisition, how long do we keep them for, what's their average spend over time, and I guess, averages is something you need to be careful of, and there's maybe another question down the track, and we've got a view of how we're going to manage that. But yeah, our goal hasn't changed, but the method to get there has now changed as a result of various data points that are telling us that what we thought was going to be the approach is not going to work, but we have a view now of something that is going to work for us to then go and continue to grow with this acquisition model.
Probably similar to Jason. I've gotten to the point where revenue for me is an outcome. It actually hides some stuff that, like, my revenue grew, it just was growing slower than my price increases, and it took me a while until I started looking at on the self-serve side, the card counts and the washer uses to really understand that there might be, not a whole, like my business might not be as healthy as I thought it was, and caused me to look a little deeper. So there's that, and then kind of where I've hit, I focus a lot more on new customer acquisition, both on the self-serve and full-serve sides. And a lot of that becomes annoying to any marketing agency I work with because I kind of only care about the true bottom of the funnel. Yeah. So it's units. For me, it's units, and it's units per. So I look a lot at per day, per hour, because a 30 and a 31-day month, you can get confused that you actually didn't slide, but if you lost a Sunday and stuff like that. So yeah, units, pers, and news. That's what I look at a lot for my KPIs, at least.
Great. So I think we'll do one or two more questions, then we'll open it up for you guys to also ask. Great insights, guys. I love this kind of idea of saying, hey, 30 days is not enough, but you also have to look on the per hour, right? So it's based on what you're trying to get at. You want to look at that long view or that really, really zoomed in view. Are there some pieces of data Or are there things that feel murky or hard to access that you wish you had more access to? Are there things when you're looking at your models being like, ugh, if I just knew X, then I might be in a better place to make a decision? It could be
Always.
from your, yeah.
Always, yeah. No, it's one thing I've been kind of excited about over the last 6-7 years that we've been in the industry is that we entered the industry to change the industry and be a part of the change, be the catalyst for change, whatever it was. And when we came into the industry, technology, laundry was 30, 40 years behind in technology than any other industry in the marketplace. And that is what allowed us to say, you know what, there's an opportunity to really change the way laundry is being done. And you know, when we started, we were piecemealing different technologies together to create this Frankenstein in order to run our business in a more competitive way. At least, you know, that's what our goal was. We're, for the first time, I think, in the world, and I'm talking about industries in the world, that laundry is at pace and at the same level as all other industries in terms of the level of data that we have access to. And maybe, just maybe, that with AI at the forefront of what the conversations are in every headline that you've probably seen, is that laundry actually has a chance to be at par or ahead of industries leveraging AI and, you know, AI to make better decisions. And that's what we're focused on is you know, we have the level of data with, you know, with all the different vendors that are here, that whatever platform you go to, focusing on who's able to give me the data I need so I can extract it with automation and start leveraging the tools that are in the marketplace that are specialized, whether it's dashboarding, whether it's marketing, whether it's CRMs, whether it's email and text, and integrating all of that to where you're automating and less having this Frankenstein model where you're literally moving data from one system to another. That is, I think, what is most exciting, because laundry has never been in that position before.
Was the question one of like, what do you wish you had that you don't have?
Yeah.
So for me, it's and I've asked you guys a bunch of times, so you know what's coming. I would like, so we're in New York City, and I think like you could take a bunch of views of this, like national averages around price points would be, I think, helpful to the industry. And then if that's possible, what I'd like to then see is like, you know, local to your local city that you're operating, are there pockets that can support higher price points? Now, I have a bunch of theories. You know, I'd just love to see the data. And I think there's guys like yourselves and Matt's business and Happy Nest, and, you know, there's a bunch of other players that have this national leverage, a national level of data that I think can help the industry. And I have a view that, like, industry-wide, we're underpriced. The margins in the business, when you start to really get into it, are lower than they should be, in my opinion. And part of that issue is that the way we price as an industry, and we're sort of slow to move on it. We're reluctant to increase prices across the board. I think one of the things that could help with that is more information around industry averages, and then, you know, hyper-localized view of like what price point can this area support. The reality is that some locations, there's a cap, right? But if you understand, like, okay, we think this area sits in this range, you can make investment decisions, you can make decisions around whether or not you open routes up that go there, and, you know, a whole bunch of decisions can happen off the back of that type of data.
I'll back you up on that. So another part of our company is hotel revenue management. That industry is like data heavy. I mean, that is all we do, is work on data to be understanding supply and demand, and you know, pickups and, you know, events. And the most important part of that data that we use is comp sets. So whatever hotel that's our client, we will, you know, well, not we, the client will pick what their 8 to 10 competitors are in that market. And once you do that, you have, you know, a kind of a centralized company that gathers what the rates are for all those properties. And they also then give you what those hotels competitively picked up versus you in the market from the day before, a month before, whatever it is. So you have a very accurate picture of how you're performing and how you're performing against your comp set in the market. And what we do there is that we're competing every day to find a way to be first, second, or third for our clients in that comp set, and that's the value we drive. Laundry does not have that. I mean, laundry is very similar to hospitality, where it was, call it 20 years ago, in the 90s, where you have night shift or morning shift that would actually, part of their job was to call every hotel in their market to get prices, so that way the manager can make decisions on how they're going to be making reservations for the rest of the day or how they're going to be pricing for the rest of the day. And once you have enough people doing that, what are they going to do? Oh yeah, my rates are $150 a night. You drive by, it's like $39.99, right? And they're just lying just to be like anti-competitive or like just throw baits out there or traps out there, I guess. And that's where laundry is right now, is that you're basically having to go around and understand what the pricing is by walking into the store or by asking your teams, okay, make sure that every month you're getting a comp set and understanding where the pricing is, so that way we align that up with the data that we see is that, okay, well, why did revenue fall? Oh, you have this laundry that opened up down the street, or you have them that's giving out free dry now, so now we're having to compete in a free dry market. Those sort of things are I think, second is, to your point, what is done in hospitality, it's only strengthened the industry, because now it weeds out the folks that are just trying to get to the price to the bottom. It's lifted the entire industry in the hospitality side, and I think that there's an opportunity to do that in laundry as well.
I want no more data right now. I do. I want more insights, and it's again, I'm parroting what these guys have said. I want benchmarking, right? I want to be able to see how I'm doing against people in this room, because you're the people that are here that want to grow your businesses, right? I don't want to compare to everybody else. I want to compare to you, and I want to do it easily, and I want to be able to look at different markets and stuff like that. I want it to be easier to get the data that I want. In a way, and it's kind of foolish that I have to go build my own dashboard, right? It's not foolish, because I want to look at my things a certain way, and we all do, and that's fine. But honestly, we keep asking the question about data, and what we should be pressing folks on that are providing us the data is to give me insights. Because that's what's going to allow us to act on that stuff. And if you said, okay, you got to have one more thing, then find a way to give me attribution, right? Because the people that walk in the door to my store, and I know it's not a laundromat. I don't think it's the panacea of all the how do we connect online to the offline world. But if that's a gap, but honestly, I can get by with what I have on the data side right now. I just want to make it easier to expose insights.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's. The data is the table stakes, because even if you're an offline business, you have no technology, there is data there. You can find it by looking at your security camera. You can find the ways to quantify something, but the insights to then understand what it actually means is the value driver here. Now, we have some more questions that we have prepared for our panel here, but I also want to make sure that there's an opportunity for folks in the audience, if you have any questions around data, around insights, trends, et cetera, on how these operators have used it. I'll give, I'll maybe ask one more question while you think of it. But is there anybody in the room here that has a question before we continue on? Yes.
Look at you. Who's going to get there first?
So you just hit on a key point with even if you don't have any data, like if you're dealing with a zombie laundromat who maybe the owner's been there 40 years and they don't even have a spreadsheet. How do you, I know you have to start to build it, but what do you look for? What type of data can you start to glean from that location to just kind of get just the basics?
Yeah, I'll answer that. Just one anecdote that I heard recently of a prospective operator was looking at buying a store, saw the income of the location, was pretty excited about the opportunity. And so what they decided to do was actually go to the store and just visit it for a couple of days. And he found that there was one woman that was running her own wash and fold business out of that location. And that self-serve revenue that just looked like it was a good year-over-year cash flow driver was actually highly concentrated with one woman's business that's being run out of that store. And the risk of buying that location is that woman stops going, you might lose 60% of your perceived self-serve revenue, right? So physically going to a location, interviewing customers, if you actually are operating the store, look at what's actually happening inside of your location. Those are some anecdotal ways where you can parse that non-existent data to a certain extent. Look at your utility bill. Look at the utilization in different ways, because it is all around. So just one anecdote, but these folks have a better view.
I'm assuming if it's a zombie mat, it's probably coin operated. I'd be looking into understanding like what's happening at the machine level. Like, is the data skewed towards larger machines? I'm assuming you're going to buy it and then retool. So you could get some understanding there, and then I'd probably like pair that with like foot count into the store, like who's coming in. Is it big Hispanic families that are spending, we have people back in with their ute and unload 20 bags of laundry. They're coming in just doing a couple of families worth of laundry. That's a data point on its own, because now I've got an ideal customer, and so I can start to build a marketing strategy potentially around some of the data that I've got to target those types of families. They might live, in one direction of the store, and then the other way might be a different type of community. So whilst you think that there's no data there, the data's everywhere. You just got to look for it. And there's just like we could talk for another hour around like the analog data that you can get out of a store that isn't digital. There's still a lot of value there, in my opinion. What time do people come in? There's another data point. Is it most heavy at certain times of the day? And how does that compare to utilisation? So if from 5 to 6 p.m, the entire store is full and there's no machines, or the dryers there's not enough dryers, then there's some data there. Okay, when we do go and retool, can we put more dryers in, because that's where we see the problem at the expense of a couple of the smaller washers, because we're not seeing as much usage on the 20-pounders as we are on the bigger washers. So plenty of data, even in analog stores, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
I'm coming, Jamie. So I'm curious if there's 1 to 3 insights that you would like to have that you have not been able to obtain.
I mentioned mine earlier.
Alex, you should be answering this.
It's around.
Gilli, you should be answering this. What are you working on? Go ahead, sorry.
No, I think, I mentioned earlier the one around like nationwide pricing and then hyper-localized pricing, I think is something that I would like to understand. It would help me then make investments decisions around where do we go and look to purchase our next location. And then like, more and more data around operations. And I get that, there's a lot of data there already, and Brian makes a good point around like, okay, we should be asking for the insights. But I think even if Sense were to give us those insights, I'm still probably the kind of person that wants to go and look at what the data is doing in my specific, use case. I run my store different to everyone else in this room. We all run our stores differently, and we all think about our stores differently. We have different goals. And so like, I am of the view that, yes, I would welcome insights, but I'm always going to want the raw data to then be able to understand what is it telling me about my business. So to give you an example, we track weather events, we track national holidays and things like that. And so we're starting to piece together like enough, it's only off like a couple of year window, but we start to piece together, okay, we have these events, and then we expect that the following day or that day is going to have these outcomes. You can think about scheduling and labour and things like that. So, these guys, I guess, could match that, a weather event to here's what we think is going to happen. But sorry, there is one other point, and I mentioned it. Yes, Alex and I were talking about this yesterday. To bring into people's hands that use your store the ability to see how busy the store is at any given point in time. I think that can be something that can really probably assist your business from where it is today. Like we struggle throughout the weekend, which I guess most businesses do, at certain points of time of the weekend where like, it's chockers in there. But at other points in the weekend, you could bring more people in quite easily. And so that for people to be sitting in their lounge room and have access to that data about your store, I think could be quite a powerful thing.
Yeah.
I want more market context. I want hyper-local information, like whether it's what my competitors are doing or like what's my share of wallet in that area. Like, is there an opportunity around me? What are the businesses that are using that stuff? Like that would be the stuff, almost like when we all look at demographics when we first open a store, we got to look at the 1, 3, 5. like what's happening in that 135. And there's another thing, like if you haven't, like go get your demographic information now. I was blown away, like how much things have changed in 3 years in my local market that I had no idea was going on around me from income and things like that. But yeah, I want market context.
So probably one other, it was kind of a question that was sort of preempted here, is like what do other industries do? I come from a background that was, I served in the Australian Army, and then I got into defence manufacturing, so nothing to do with like these types of industries. But one of the things that we've spoken about a couple of times is what Slice does with the data in the pizza industry. You guys send it to me all the time. I never have enough time to look at it. But if you just understand what's happening in the pizza industry as a starting point, I think it's like a really interesting market that we can potentially learn stuff from. Like they have delivery businesses that go from the store to the customer. I have one of those. They have a price point that's pretty low. You know, pizza's $20 or something like that in New York City. So their price point is not too dissimilar to laundry. In fact, in most cases, it's lower than our minimums. And it's, from what I understand, a hugely profitable industry. So I think there's a lot in like looking at adjacent industries that operate in sort of similar sorts of ways to understand, well, what's happening in that industry that allows them to deliver a pizza to someone's house, you know, on a one-way trip for $20 and still have that profitable. Now, obviously, their cost of goods and all that it's entirely different, but there's probably something in there that, you know, if we can get data from adjacent industries, it can help us learn some. It might only be one thing, but you know, that one thing can potentially, like, you know, really change your business. So there's definitely sort of, I guess, you know, keep an open mind as to what other businesses and other sectors do.
Well, I'm glad I grabbed the mic if it's the last one. So first of all, a comment. I just want to make a comment that I know all 5 of you personally pretty intimately. Those are 5 really, really freaking smart guys up there. And it isn't lost on me that none of you, maybe Bhavin by a year, weren't in the industry 5 years ago. I just want to make that observation when we look at people and think, what do you know? You've been in the industry 2 years? Shut up, sit down, right? I think we as an industry, not people in this room, but we as an industry, I think we do that. And this is one of the best panels I've ever seen. Yeah. That's just a comment. My question is, and maybe specifically to Brian, but I'd love to hear all of you guys. So Brian, I keep hearing you say, I want this, I want this, I want this. And I think my retort to you is I agree. But for 5 people that are really smart, all roughly 5 years ago weren't in the industry, coming together on this amazing panel, my question to you is how? How do you propose, as you sit here today with the information you have, you've built your own dashboards, I'd say that's probably not a good macro solution for the industry as a whole. How do we collect this information? Bigger than Sense, bigger than Clean Cloud, bigger than Curbside, right? They can collect information, even Happiness and even manufacturers, right? How do we as an industry?
Getting rid of it's the wrong answer, right? And I understand that people are concerned about their data, but like finding a way for a neutral party to consolidate it and bring it together, like that's the world I come from. I worked at Microsoft for 25 years. Like at certain points in time, I could find out what was selling in CompUSA and Circus. I'm really dating myself. You may not have heard of these companies, right? Because there was an industry body that those people would submit data on so we could all see how we were doing relative in retail, right? Like, I mean, I sit here and toy around with like, should I be out there building dashboards for people in my spare time? Right? I wonder if the juice is worth the squeeze because I don't know how many people nerd out like I do. But the end of the day is with the advent of point of sale and card systems, like the more we can get that stuff to suck out, I mean, even if these 2 dudes down at the end, right? Even if they allowed us to, you know, they consolidate all the folks using Sense, right? And allowed some sort of industry report based on that stuff, like I would eat it up, lap it up in a second. In the same way I do the minute the CLA spends out their survey, I go through that and I try to compare myself there. But yeah, I mean, it is more about bringing it together in a data-friendly, neutral way than it is tearing it apart.
Well, just to add on Dave's question as you answer that, in the how, in the answer of the how, then what is the role? Because as vendors, I mean, I see it all the time in the Facebook groups and all the concerns people have of, oh, you're going to share my data, they're going to take our data and do all this data stuff to it, even though it's like fraud if we not follow our, you know, terms of service and policies. It's like illegal for us to do that and anything like that. But so what do you think the role and responsibility in delivering that how that a tech company has, or any vendor here, to provide that neutral central third party, but then also say, hey, don't put my stuff in there, that's my stuff, but do everybody else's, because I want to know everybody else's, but don't use my. So how do you think that kind of any vendor plays in that? Just on top of Dave's question.
I think it's education, like you talked about. Like people, I think, jump to false conclusions. Protecting it appropriately, and I'll just stop after this, is I had the good fortune of working with having available certain privacy protected data of millions of people using software. And any individual point was not interesting and not useful to me. I couldn't drive a decision. I couldn't take an action. It was the ability to look at those things in the aggregate, and maybe at most look at them in a geographic way where it became useful. And by that time, that stuff is so far anonymized, it's just doesn't matter anymore.
My perspective is incentivizing. There has to be a reason why a laundromat owner wants to share that level of information on the platform, and there has to be some level of incentive for that owner, for that group of that market, whatever it may be, to participate in it. And I'm probably gonna get into some language that's like not antitrust type of language, but it allows everybody to say, hey, the answer is not the race to the bottom. It is what is the appropriate revenue that you should do based on the services that you offer. So just because you are a older laundromat doesn't mean that you should be pricing yourself to the bottom, but you should be instead saying, hey, you know what? We have a newer laundromat down the street that I just opened up, and they're priced at $550. I don't care what machine is, right? You know what? It doesn't make sense for me to be priced at $550, but I've already paid off a store. I don't have that note. I have an opportunity here to where I can be $5 instead, not $350, right? Because at $350, they're probably not making any money from that. So as long as that owner that's at $5 can say, hey, I'm getting my fair share in the market based on what I'm offering, based on where I'm at in my store, versus the guy who just put up a brand new store and put up a bunch of money into a laundromat, they should be priced accordingly. And I think that's where if both sides of that can understand that and be comparing the market, I think that helps the industry as a whole from tearing each other apart.
I think, Dave, your question was like how? Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's like that's the reason why it doesn't exist, right? So first of all, like we're coming off a pretty low base. Just a few years ago, I only entered the industry a couple of years ago, but just a few years before I entered the industry, like we weren't even able to have these conversations because there wasn't enough data in the marketplace. There wasn't enough people thinking about laundromats in this way. And so I think like right now, the challenge is like, how do we do that? But I think like the first step is that we're starting to have these conversations like this, and then we start to encourage the thinking that is, okay, well, because I think there's a negative view in the industry of data, like just in general principles. But if we start to have, where the best operators in the country come together, we start to have open conversations around like, how can the data help both you individually, but also the industry as a whole? Like, I think that's the first step. And then, what flows out of that is other ongoing actions that maybe the CLA leads, and then, vendors and software providers can help with like continuing that conversation to the point where we can solve the how, and then we can get to a point where we have, industry insights that help around like, here's what we think the best pricing strategy is in Alabama, because we've got enough data that shows 3 different ways or 10 different ways to do it, and we saw this strategy had the biggest impact in this market. Or here's what we see as the total capital invested into these areas. They're the kinds, like when we get the how, then we can start to get when we start to have the right conversations, we can start to solve the how, and then what's going to come out of that is just, I think, like a wealth of information and conversations that we don't and can't have today. And then the industry as a whole, I think, benefits, and then individual businesses can, take that and then flourish.
Great. So I think we're gonna close out. I just want to think that this conversation that we just had is really, really important. And I think that there is an element of bravery, right? We have to go ahead and say, I'm willing to give myself to the collective so we can go ahead and learn from that. But I think we all in this room see the opportunity that's there. If we had those sorts of insights and we did think a little bit more collectively, then how much more laundry can we do? And how much more money can we make? And so I think we all have our own roles in that. But I'm really glad we kind of ended there because I think that's a real good call to action for all of us to think about how we can leverage data as an industry to push it forward.
Yeah, and in that sharing, like you still have to be careful. You still have to ask the right questions. You still have to know what data is. You still have to care about your privacy and trust with your vendors and all of that. But when that's all there, then we can have conversations like this. And so I want to thank CLA for the Wash Dry Fold Conference. Thank our amazing panelists for sharing all of their insights and for all of you for all your questions.